here to talk about a storyteller brand who is a leader in the podcast production industry on the Impact Brand Doctor podcast with Rich Kozak. And check out these rich strategy nuggets that you can use right now. This is the Brand Doctor podcast with Rich Kozak, where we positively uplift brands with straight talk you can trust. Do you need more clarity about your brand? Are you stuck at the starting gate to the next level of your brand and maybe the gate's locked? Well, bring your challenges and your vision right here to the Brand Doctor podcast. Today, we are blessed to be interviewing Seth Silvers, founder of the Story On Media brand and host of the Small Business Storytellers podcast. Seth is a bit of a who's who. We'll get to that in the interview. I just want to say thank you for being here. Welcome to the Brand Doctor podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and this has been a fun day to get to spend time and with a bunch of different podcasters. But I've been looking forward to this interview.
It has been. So here we go. I've read all kinds of things about you, and I've heard stories about you today. So I'm going to start with, what is, of all people, I'm going to ask you that, what is the value of podcasting and content to nurture your dream audience? Is that living on Someday Isle, the dream audience, or is that like dancing tonight? Like what's the value?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And that actually shows a little bit of a different opinion that I have than some people in the podcasting space, where I think there's a lot of people where they're saying, hey, start a business podcast. It's going to grow your business. And all of the focus is on customer acquisition. I actually think podcasting is best when it's focused as a long-term nurturing tool for your community. I think, maybe a decade ago, HubSpot kind of brilliantly, kind of made popular this concept of like buyer's journey for a lot of small businesses, where they, talked about how there's these stages of awareness, consideration, and decision. And everybody's at different journeys in different places on that journey. And so a lot of times marketers are yelling at people in the awareness stage as if they're at the decision stage. They're saying, yeah, buy me, buy me, buy me. And they barely even know about the problems. So I think a podcast is a really good tool for people wherever they're at on kind of your buyer's journey to be able to jump in and learn from you. And really, you get to help them accelerate that journey. I like to think of a podcast as kind of an educational watering hole for your dream audience, where like they're going to be coming somewhere to get information. They might as well be coming to you. And a podcast gives you a way to nurture that over a long, long time.
I want you to know, I am really glad that you're here and that you were saying that. I sat on the board of directors of the American Marketing Association International. So I love marketing. Marketing goes way back. But there's a lot of not good branding and not good marketing out there. And you could be just a podcast guy who knows how to produce podcasts, but you're not. You're a podcast strategist. You're a podcast visionary. You see trends for the industry. You see what's happening, and you see it differently than people. So thank you for sharing that. I've got to ask you, what can marketers do with a podcast that they can't do on other media?
Yeah, I think that it's more the way a podcast is unique from, let's say, YouTube or Facebook or other forms of content. It really is in its long form in more unscripted fashion. Mm-hmm. I just said, and we probably won't edit that out. And if we edited out every pause and every in this podcast, then it would feel odd. It wouldn't feel like a conversation. It would probably feel like TV, because TV is a channel that's, perfectly edited. And if we went to the movie theater and we saw something, we expect like precision, but we don't expect the same precision when we're having conversations with friends. And so I think a podcast really gives marketers a way to connect on a more personal level, and businesses a way to connect on a more personal level, just because the nature, and this is the majority of podcasts. We're not talking about heavily edited fiction podcasts, and this isn't true of all genres.
Yes.
But in general, most of the brand podcasts we're talking about, it's an opportunity for people to be a fly on a wall when you're having a conversation with another thought leader.
That prompts a question about authenticity, because it's either there or it's not.
Yeah.
So in what ways does being authentic when you're podcasting and you're trying to reach your
target audience and speak to them.
Mm-hmm.
In what ways does being authentic work for you or work against you?
Yeah. So the answer is actually the same for both. It exposes you. I think authenticity and really storytelling, it exposes you, which means if you're doing good work, that's a good thing. If you're doing bad work, you're going to fall on your face. And so I think with this has kind of been a shift over the last like 10, 15 years. And I started seeing this when I was young in high school and college, where I was realizing the brands I loved were the brands that I knew the impact they were making.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember like Tom's shoes kind of became the cliche example,
They go way back.
they made such an impression on me when I was in high school, because it was like, oh, you can be a business and give back, and you can be a business and be focused on good. And then I got to meet some mentors that were really successful in business so they could give back. And so I began to develop a desire to know, how are businesses giving back? How are they being authentic? Do they have a goal to actually impact lives, or are they just trying to make money? So I want to know the stories. I realize I'm not alone. It's actually a whole massive multi-generational shift that's happening. And so right now, consumers want to know more than just what you sell. And so that's a good thing if you're selling something that makes a difference.
Right.
If your only goal is to sell a crappy product to make as much money as you can on the backs of people that are just being manipulated by ads, it's going to expose you. So I think storytelling and authenticity, it's going to expose a lot of bad players, and their customers are going to say, well, there's a competitor who's talking about the impact they're doing. And then it's going to give a lot of credibility and a lot of growth to the good players.
Well, you are speaking to a voice for impact-driven branding. In my book, Impact-Driven Branding, 7 Steps for Your Brand to Ensure It Impacts People's Lives in the World, is about to come out this year when I speak at Best UX.
I love it.
So we're on the same page on that. Wow, what a great answer. So I'm going to ask you about your own brand and the challenges that you've had to brand it. And when you think about branding, obviously you're a person to whom impact is important, to whom using business as a force for good means something. When it comes to branding your brand, the Story on Media brand, let's take that one. She also had the podcast, but the Story on Media brand, which is, let's call it the umbrella brand for now. What challenges come to mind about branding you? What do you struggle with? What do you, frustrated about? Because people have different feelings about branding. What are your feelings?
Yeah, I think the thing that I've struggled with is the intentionality behind it. I haven't been that intentional about our brand. We've always, we've had a logo, and our logo is pretty good and it's been the same, but I know branding is much more than a logo. And so I think that I really haven't been that intentional with a brand. And now we're entering a phase as a business where I know that is probably us not having the clarity that we should with our brand is probably going to hold us back, because we're getting better, we're getting bigger and bigger opportunities. We're getting, to thankfully be a part of some pretty notable things. And so then if our brand isn't clear, and if our brand doesn't support the messaging that we're putting out there, even in an interview like this, then there's conflict there. So I think a lot of my conflict and struggle has been internal, because I've just prioritized so many other things other than our brand. And that's something I want to change this year, but I just haven't really been intentional about it.
So may I tell you a story?
Please.
I was asked to write usually it's a story about others, but since it's a story about me, I was asked to write a chapter in a book called Visibility. Powerful speakers sharing life-changing messages from the stage. And the name and focus of the chapter, because I felt it was the most important thing I could share in that realm, was the way your brand speaks shapes its impact. Speaks means shows up, means what it says, what it looks like, the consistency, the whole thing speaks. And shapes its impact means when people look at the brand and they behave differently, they shift their behavior, they shift their purchase behavior, they shift their behavior because they've been coached at whatever. The impact that the brand has on people is shaped by the way the brand shows up. They either bounce off and go away, or they're attracted and they come, or, they learn something, or they begin the process of reframing who they are or how they see things, whatever. Right? So it is vital. And I'll send you a copy of this article by the back of the book. I'll send you the book. But it's about first impression management. So here's a rich brand nugget. First impression, you only get one chance at first impression management. And when you've defined and language your brand in advance, and because you've defined and prioritized and I'll be specific, and write this down, the top 3 characteristics on first impression. So there's this list of characteristics the brand must become to make its impacts. And you've prioritized the top 3, top 5, top 7, top 10, so that when somebody sees the brand for the first time, or is introduced to the brand, or sees a piece of collateral, or sees a business card, or goes to the homepage on your website above the fold, first impression management, any entry portal, landing page, any entry portal, do you get credit for the top 3 characteristics? I don't know. It's up to you, man. Most people go like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Well, see, wait a minute. What makes brands come alive? Consistency, consistent language that transfers energy, recognizability, and congruence with the heart of the brand. So I love what I feel is the heart of your brand. When I read Seth Silvers' passion about storytelling, authentic marketing, and the business is a force for good, it tells me a lot about you because you wrote that. And we've talked before we went on camera here and on microphone. But if you don't get credit for that, because the language of the brand, you talk about marketing, you're talking about this, you're talking about that, you're talking about podcasting, but you don't ensure that when somebody sees you for the first time, the next generation or the people that aren't your customers or the people you want to be their customers or whatever, get that perception, because your brand is the perception, and it's a perception.
Yeah.
It's their perception. Right. So branding is what all those things you do to get to shape that perception. And so the language is critical.
Yeah.
And, so there's your rich brand nugget. I mentioned before about the future.
Yeah.
You see, I heard a lot of stories I heard that you interviewed Mark Cuban in Dallas at the podcast event, last year. And so obviously you're kind of a who's who. People trust you. They can put you in front of industry leaders and you can behave and talk lucidly. So I want to ask you about trends you see for, that are just beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But before I do that, I'm going to say that question. I'm going to say about your future, the future of your brand. Is now the time to define the brand you will become? Are you working on that? Are you struggling with it? Is it something that you're not dealing with and you really need to, or are you already thinking about it and you think, wow, these are the challenges that we're up against? Where are you in that about the future of the brand? What challenges of the future of your brand?
Yeah, I think a big transition over the last 2 years and in our brand and in our company really has been me as the CEO being willing to empower other people. And really by that, I just mean stop trying to do everything myself.
Wonderful.
And realizing I'm actually not designed to be able to do it all myself very well.
None of us are.
Yeah, exactly.
Life is a team sport. Okay.
It is. So I think as far as these next few years, I'm laser focused on podcasting. And this actually this will tie into the question you asked in a few minutes about the future of podcasting. But I want to build one of the most trusted podcast agencies in the country.
Beautiful.
I don't know if that will be the biggest. Doesn't matter. That's not really the point. I do think growth is really, really important. And I do kind of subscribe to the thinking of, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so my team right now, we're kind of struggling we have really clear goals, but we also don't just want to set like hustle and grind goals just to have hustle and grind goals. But we're really focused on building a trusted agency where our clients are multiplying. Like, I think 4 of our last 5 clients came from our current clients.
Beautiful.
And that's something that we really, really value. And so we're focusing on things like retention. I want our clients to see themselves staying with us for years, not just, a 6-month period or something. And so that's really where our focus is as a brand, is in building really deep relationships and really undeniably valuable relationships with the clients that we're serving. And I think that care will then go into those stories that our clients are getting out, which then gets to impact their audiences and benefit their businesses, which is really what an agency is a fun space to be in, because I kind of get to vicariously live through my clients. Like, we get to work with really, really amazing clients and people that are doing awesome things. And hopefully what we do just like adds gasoline to what they're doing.
I understand that feeling, because I have some of the most phenomenally world-changing clients who have found rich brands and impact-driven coaching, and I know that feeling. So I'm right there with you. May I tell you a story that will speak to your future?
Yeah, I'd love that.
Right. Getting credit for those things that are in your mind, but not in your brand yet, not in your external communication, and you're not getting credit for them. Okay. So, I have a client, who is a doctor of jurisprudence and a certified financial planner and an accredited investment fiduciary. And she has helped wealthy families for years. And we created a brand for her called Money, Truth, and Life, and created a book and an online course to give away what most people cannot afford to come and buy from her, because she's been so cheap, wealthy. But one of the things she wasn't getting credit for was her ability to help families create their legacy. The legacy in her mind is biblical. It's not you don't leave a legacy, you create it, and it's multi-generational, and you pass it on, and you keep it moving, and you talk about it, and you revere it. That's mistakes you've made, where you came from, who you are, who didn't work out, what happened, how you grew, how you didn't grow, all of that is legacy, and you celebrate it, and because we're human, and it's about love, and it's about a lot of things. And so we're in the midst of, when we last worked, we were in the midst of shaping her next event called Layers of Legacy. And the brand is Money, Truth, and Life, but we will chapter it. And so the next book is probably going to be Money, Truth, and Legacy, or something, it's like, we'll create stakes in the brand that move the brand forward. And we do that with all of our businesses. So the story, the Rich Brand Nugget is, if you're not getting credit for what makes you outstanding or what will make you outstanding in the future, it's up to you to take credit. And as simple as that is, it is a Rich Brand Nugget. So write this down. Make sure you write into your brand language and into your target and into your categories of expertise that you must get credit for. Maybe it's the third one or the fourth one, and it happens in 2 years, but write it down and craft it and start getting credit by taking credit, writing articles, writing content, speaking to it, being known for it, because you'll want to get credit that's important. Let's say you want to be green, your company to be green. You can talk about it right now by saying, we know we want to be green in 6 years. By 2025, we want to be totally green. You can start that right now and literally make a becoming roadmap with little things on it that says, we're going to do a green project. We're going to add a green division. We're going to hire 5 guys named Green, whatever it is, move it out to and you get credit. You'll take credit all the way along by raising the issue, talking about how important it is. In 6 months, we'll be green. We're green. And what have you done? You've gotten credit for green all the way along. If we don't take credit, we don't get credit. And one of the biggest problems, big brands, I had a $14 billion company that had 300 and some experts worldwide, didn't get credit for any of it because they didn't talk about it. We forced them to do a PR program to get articles in it just to get credit, Fortune magazine and stories about the thing they built in China and why they were chosen. And oh my God, I didn't know you guys had experts. Yeah, duh. Yeah. Some of you got to take credit to get credit. And sorry, but anyway, so write that down because I'll do it. And then it comes down to crafting the language, and that's powerful. So, hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I'll be thinking about that.
So what do you see trends that are starting, that we're kind of at the incipient stages for right now in the industry?
Yeah, I think one that I've seen, and I've seen it over the last couple of years, but I think it's going to become even more of a thing and more prominent. I think the word podcasting is going to start mattering less and less.
Mm.
And I don't think it really matters. I don't really care. There's definitely some people in the
unwrap that for us. So we
yeah. So, what is a podcast? This is going to go on YouTube. There's going to be we're also recording video and different things. So to some might say, oh, well, a podcast has to be audio only. And, others might say, well, it has to have an RSS feed, which is a complicated way for saying that anything that's exclusive to Spotify doesn't have an RSS feed. So, are you going to say Joe Rogan's podcast is not a podcast? There's some that would. So there's all of these debates and conversations about what is a podcast and what is not a podcast. I don't think any of it matters.
Okay.
You're a content creator.
I heard it here first, or maybe not, but there you go.
Yeah, you're a content creator
and you own your IP.
You own your IP. You're creating content for an audience. You might be doing video. I might not be, but the goal, the value, I think, is you're creating long form content for an audience. And so I think there's a lot that podcasters could learn from YouTubers, and there's a lot that YouTubers could learn from podcasters. So I think that the umbrella of the creator economy is going to kind of be a little bit more all encompassing. And the term of podcaster or podcasting is, for a lot of podcasters, going to become maybe not the most prominent identifier.
Got it. So what do you see ahead for the industry and maybe for the individual podcasters themselves? Does it all go bust? Does it go left, go right? Does everybody have a podcast?
Yeah, I mean, so here's some interesting numbers for you. I don't think it's going bust at all. I think we're still very, very young. And I apologize to the viewers that are more knowledgeable on these numbers than me. But as I last looked, maybe a month or two ago, I think it's around 4.5 million RSS feeds, which some would say that means podcast. Spotify says there's over 5 million podcasts. So that means there's about, 500,000 to 1 million podcasts that don't have an RSS feed that are on platforms like Spotify. Podcasts that have uploaded in the last 30 days that would be considered active, it's far less than 500,000. So about 8 to 10%. So that's really, really wild. Once you look at podcasts that have published in the last 7 days, it's even less. It's like a couple 100,000. I think it's like 130, 140,000. 10 years ago, there was a handful of YouTube channels that had 1 million subscribers. Today, there's over 10,000 YouTube channels that have 10,000 subscribers. When you look at active YouTube channels, there's over 50 million that are publishing content regularly. So when you look at it, if you just compare active YouTube channels to active podcasts, it's about 2%.
Wow.
So there's so much space for podcasting to grow. And I mean, for the last decade, a lot of people have said, oh man, like YouTube's too saturated. There's too many videos. And sure enough, there continues to be, new niches and new categories and all of these things. And so I think the same thing's going to happen with podcasting. I think we are still really, really early. I'm a big fan of very narrow categories in podcasting, especially for businesses. You don't need 1 million listeners. You don't need to be the next Jordan Harbinger or Joe Rogan or any of those people. They're amazing and they have huge audiences and they can monetize their show and make really good money because they have millions of listeners a week. But if you're a business owner and you're strategic and you're creating that watering hole that we were talking about,
exactly,
you might only need 100 listeners. You might only need 10. It all depends on what the goal of the podcast is.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to see more and more podcasters where they realize it doesn't have to be huge. If I asked you to come to Colorado and I said, hey, there's 35 people, they're your target audience, and they're in my living room and they want to hear you come and speak tomorrow night, you'd get on a plane. You'd probably come to Colorado
and speak in my language.
And so, but when it's a podcast, we're like, oh, no, 35 listeners. That's not very many. So I think individual podcasters and particularly business podcasters, because that's kind of the space we're in, they're going to begin to realize it doesn't have to be huge. It all depends on what you want. And they're going to be more okay with having a really, really narrow, but super, super valuable podcast.
And one of the ways I take that from a branding standpoint and a marketer standpoint is that as marketers, the more discerning we get about how we use media, and this is just a media, it's just a media channel, just like the other ones you mentioned. So when it comes down to branding, and it would technically be marketing, it would be one of the pathways. It's always a decision, and you choose the channels that reach your target. So if your target customized reaches your channel because you've designed it for them and they always show up, there's not much more to say.
Yeah.
So I understand the point, and I totally agree with you. And so, but thank you. I appreciate that reflection. What a lot of room to grow, and it depends on you and how you use it as to how you do that.
Yeah.
Thank you. This has been marvelous. We have had a chance to lift up the brand journey of Seth Silvers, who is the founder of his Story on Media brand and the host of the Small Business Storytellers podcast. Seth is an industry thought leader and revered enough to be put on stages to represent the industry. I am really glad he was here tonight to be authentic about what he sees and what he's experienced. I hope you have gained some insight about using the rich brand nugget that you heard here to help your brand focus and be better in breaking through to reach your target audience. I want you to know that from our heart to yours, we want you to follow the Rich Brand's The Brand Doctor podcast, because we have all these episodes with rich brand nuggets where you can go right now and get action items you can use right now. So we hope you do that. We'll give you more information and ways to reach our guest tonight on the show notes. And remember, now is the time for you to define the brand you will become. This is Rich Kozak.